What's up, guys? My name's Lennek. Today I'm working on a tutorial for you guys. It is a tutorial on how to macro as a Terran. We're just going to be going over a handful of things that I've learned over the years learning how to play this race. It's been my favorite race since I've been little. I just like having tanks and guns because those things are fun. So that's why I've loved Terran. I'm going to be going over a handful of things. Mistakes that we usually make when it comes to macro. I don't know if you've ever been on Reddit or some other way of asking for help and everyone's just like, it's your macro, it's your macro, it's your macro. And yes, for the most part it is. And that advice always just seems super vague. So we're going to go into a little bit more of specifics to figure out what we need to work on. So I'm almost a 4K Terran, I'm 3.9. And we're gonna just go over a handful of the mistakes that I've made specifically about macro. This game, we're going to talk about the dangers of not making enough, which I think for the most part, a lot of us focus on. But I mean, we still got to talk about it because like that's one of the big problems is not making enough, not making enough stuff. So here you see that we are just doing normal macro. We got a second base, we have our 2 production facilities making stuff, and we're starting to run into a problem. As you can see by this command card on the bottom, our barracks, our factory, our command centers, they're all being used. And up here in the top right, we have a lot of minerals. So once again, everything's being used and we have a butt ton of minerals in the bank. And that is a classic symptom of not making enough buildings. On the flip side of the coin, we have a problem when we make too many buildings. Because when we make too many buildings, we aren't able to expand very well because we're too busy producing out of all of our production facilities, like our barracks and our factories. Notice how we're going to have a hard time keeping up the production. So right now we have an idle barracks, so it's like, what was the point in even making the idle barracks? We don't have a expansion, as you can tell, which normally we would by the 2-minute mark. And we don't have an orbital command because we're just too poor. Look up in the top right, you see how much money we have? Like, that is money that we can't put into supply depots, we can't put into expansions because we're too busy spending it all on units. And like, this is just way too safe. Making this many units is just absolutely the wrong way to play Terran. Making units is not how you grow. All of these Marines that I currently have could have been a command center, could have been an orbital, which would have been exponentially making our economy better. But we're stuck in this point where we don't have any money, as you can see in the top right, to actually expand. We're just stuck on the little base that we have. So the symptoms of making too many buildings is not being able to expand, not being able to fully use all of your barracks, your factories, your starport. You'll have times where you just can't make stuff because you're just dirt poor, so you only have one base economy. And yes, you can have the same problem with 2, 3, 4, X amount of bases of just having these same symptoms of not being able to expand because you're using too many production facilities at the same time. As you can see right now, I have to stop using production facilities to even plant down a new command center. Jumping into a Reaper Fast Expand game, one of the things that I want to talk about that we need to do is tabbing between all of our hotkeys fairly fast. So we have our command centers on 5, my barracks on 4. I mean, you can do whatever you want, whichever buttons are easiest for you. But the reason that you see a lot of pros just like spamming the heck out of these buttons is to help them keep track of what is producing and what needs to be produced. So here we're in the main base of Maru to demonstrate this point. He was nice enough to let me find this replay on the internet that I can use to teach you guys. But yeah, go ahead and look down here on the command card and you see how he's swapping between things. This helps him know whether a building is completed, it lets him know if something is being produced out of it, and all around it just helps him manage his economy without directly looking at it. Anyway, going back to my base, it's best if we can always keep just one thing producing at a time. but let's be real, we're not Maru. Let's just shoot for keeping 2 things in the production cycle, because that way we will always have something starting as something finishes. If we only have 1 thing, then we'll find that frequently we don't have very much going on in our production facilities. I want to talk about macro cycle a little bit. Yes, we've talked about tabbing between production facilities like command centers and unit producing structures to make sure that they're doing stuff, but we also need to be checking this number in the top right corner very frequently. So if I was to describe a macro cycle, I would first create SCVs, second I'd create units, third I'd check if I need to do a supply depot, and then fourth, if I have any extra money, I can build a command center or another production facility, or maybe an upgrade building. But only would I make another building if I've done those other steps of making units, making SCVs, and making supply depots. These 4 steps, we're gonna just rotate through them as fast as we can. We as a player are going to be hitting our hotkeys fast enough and acting like we're going through the macro cycle faster than the macro cycle is actually happening. So what I mean by that is we're going to be hitting, look at my hotkeys. I have my command centers on 5 and my production facilities on 4. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do 5, check my SCVs, 4, check my units, look at the top right, check my supply, and then look at my money and see if I need to have any additional buildings. I can do that in 1 to 2 seconds. So that decision is going to be happening over and over and over and over to do that cycle, because honestly the producing thing is kind of brainless. It's only really deciding whether or not you want to make a building or a supply depot that takes a lot of the brain power. Other things should be muscle memory, and I promise if you just tab through your buildings and check these things very frequently, macro will become second nature to you. One of the things that I do want to talk about is command centers, when we should put them down. So in that 4th step of when we're checking our minerals and our gas to see if we can afford a new building, if we can afford a command center, we should put 1 down. Obviously we don't want to put 2 down at the same time. Then at that point we can put down more unit producing structures. But we always want to be able to be in a position where we have enough money from our income to get command centers. We don't want to produce too many unit producing structures so that we never have enough money for additional command centers, because the command centers is what enables the growth of pretty much everything of our units, of our economy. It is the center buildings. I mean, I guess that makes sense, them being the main bases. The only time that you really wouldn't want to make a command center as the priority is when you're under very heavy pressure. You might want to drop down a couple unit producing structures until you can fend them off for a little bit. But besides that, command centers are your priority, even if you're under just a little bit of pressure. You can find that you'll be able to swap out your SCVs for mules in the later game. That'll free up so much supply for your army, so you can have one army attacking one end, another attacking another. I mean, I guess that's more the micro side, but I've just found that producing command centers fairly frequently is a huge part of making the macro just spiral out of control in your favor. So I highly suggest it. Anyway, this is a fun game. I leave the next 2 minutes to you to just watch. This is an example of just maxing out at 9 minutes or 9:50. I can't remember, but I'll end the video when I max out.
Mineral field depleted.
Go, go, go! SCV ready.
Upgrade complete.
SCV
Finished.
Ready for dust off.
SCV ready. SCV ready. Ready. SCV ready. Armed and ready.
Ready for dust off.
We finished that.
Somebody, get me out of this mess.